poets here to discuss how we can use our words to honor the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. And our first guest today is Mr. Floyd Stokes. Floyd Stokes is the founder and executive director of the American Literacy Corporation. He has written over 20 books, including Say Ah, The Teeth Book, Popcorn, There Was an Old Lady Who Lived in a Shoe, My Glasses, Bullying is Bad, A.J. Brewster. On May 1st, 2009, he was awarded an honorary doctorate of humanities from Central Penn College. And in 2010, he's now read to children in all 50 states. So thank you for joining us this morning, Floyd. Happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Our next guest is Christine Titi. She is the founder and president of Oaks of Central PA. It's a 501c nonprofit whose mission is to empower, promote, and advocate for the African immigrant and refugee community in the greater Harrisburg area. She is also the CEO of CT Home Care Services, which provides home and community-based services to adults with physical and intellectual disabilities. Christine is originally from Valley, a village located in the northwest region of Cameroon. She has an MBA in international business from Point Park University, Pittsburgh, PA. She lives in Camp Hill with her daughter and mother. Thank you for being with us today, Christine. Can you see this? I'm still a novice at this screen sharing, everyone, but. Okay, here we go. Our next guest is Toussaint, and he is an author, educator, and photographer. How many screens am I sharing, everybody?
Just one.
Okay. It doesn't look like that on my side, just so you know. Toussaint is an author, educator, photographer, and a Messiah University alum from Haiti. He is the author of Superheroes of Service, An Immigrant Story. He is currently working on his next comic novels, which are expected to be out later this year. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
See, our next guest is Julia Mallory. Julia is a poet, children's book author, and founder of the creative literary arts brand Black Mermaids. She also serves as the senior poetry editor for Raising Mothers and hosts the Stop Shrinking social cast. Her latest book, Survivor's Guilt, takes an unflinching look at grief. She has a Bachelor of Science from Elizabethtown College and completed her graduate studies at Eastern University. She's the mother of 3 children and lives in Central Pennsylvania. Thanks for being with us today, too, Julia.
Thank you for having me, Shelley.
And our next guest is Benet Hartman. Somebody else doing the admitting? Wave to everyone, Benet. Benet Hartman is a literacy specialist in Lansing School District, Lansing, Michigan. She was an assistant professor in the College of Education at the University of Pittsburgh and the University of South Florida. She was also a former teacher for Prince George County Public Schools in Glen Arden, Maryland. Dr. Hartman has written 3 award-winning children's books: September's Big Assignment, Jasmine Can, Creating Self-Confidence, and My Elephant-Sized Dream. He has also authored several articles that appeared in the Reading Teacher, The Advocate, and Urban Education on the importance and use of African American children's literature. She was on the board of directors for the Michigan Reading Association and was chair of the Diversity Committee. Dr. Hartman's been a champion for helping students become independent and avid readers, writers, and thinkers, and is committed to this pursuit for the years to come. So thank you for being with us today, Benet.
Thanks for having me.
a little plug. Here's her book. And yours truly worked with Benet on this project as the illustrator. And we go way back. We've been friends for what, 35 years?
Yes, 35 plus.
Yeah. And we're only 19. Okay. So again, thank you everyone for joining us today. And we're happy to lead this discussion on how we can use our words to honor the legacy of Dr. King. And I'm just going to start with a question. I'd like to give each of our guests a chance to answer in their own way. First of all, my question for the group is, how can being an author advance the vision of Dr. King's legacy? Floyd, would you start us off with how you see that happening? How being an author can advance the vision of Dr. King's legacy?
Yeah, good question. And Shelley, thank you for having me and all the organizers of this forum. And it's just a pleasure to be a part of, such esteemed guests. Know some of you all, but glad to meet you all virtually. As an author, growing up in the Deep South in Mississippi, books weren't as prevalent as they are now, and especially books that featured, African American characters. So one way that we can advance Dr. King's dream is to write books that feature people who look like us, and so that kids can have a positive self-image of themselves, and write stories that inspire them. One of my books is My Glasses. And of course, this book features an African-American little girl who didn't like wearing her glasses. And this is not a selling point, but sharing that to say that it connects with children who are people of color. And actually, I've had a lot of children of color who've been excited about the book. So one of my friends, Jacqueline Woodson, most of us know her. She uses the phrase mirrors and windows a lot. Mirrors are creating books that, feature people who look like us. And then windows are reading books that may not feature characters with us in them. So we're learning about other people, looking through the window and seeing and learning about other cultures and races and things of that nature. So that's one of the ways that we can advance this dream, by writing books that uplift us as a people.
Thank you. Julia, could you interject on how you feel being an author can advance the vision of Dr. King's legacy?
I think that Floyd, if I can just echo what Floyd is saying, and that expression, windows and mirrors, is from Dr. Rudine Bishop Sims. And she also, I would say, kind of updated it to include sliding glass doors.
Yeah.
Right. And so the idea about, children, like Floyd said, children being able to see themselves reflected back, because when we see ourselves represented in a multitude of ways, it gives us an opportunity to know that we matter in the world. And then when other children see other children that are not like them being centered, it gives them a chance to know that they're not the only ones that exist in the world. And so the late poet Lucille Clifton said that some children only have mirrors, and some children only have windows, and isn't that a shame? And so I think that when we put our books out into the world, and just really giving children, it's still pretty radical to put a child of color, to put a Black child on the cover of books in 2021. I know that it's kind of on trend, and it seems like, oh, there's Black books everywhere, or even just featuring other people of color as well. So I think part of, I think, what Dr. King was also interested in was this idea of equity, and just making sure that there was adequate representation. So books is a business, and we see across the board that a lot of times, you know, there's this movement called Own Voices, this idea that people who are represented in the stories are the ones who also can tell those stories. So I think that when we do this work, when we say, hey, it is okay for us to tell our own stories and our own likeness, I think we are helping to fulfill the promise of the idea of equity, which Dr. King was absolutely concerned with.
Thank you, Julia. Christine, would you like to give us your take on how being an author can advance the vision of Dr. King's legacy?
Yeah, thank you once more for this opportunity. It's really a pleasure to be among, all of you. I'm a newbie to this author thing, so I'm gonna try to answer to the best of my ability. So, okay, yeah. So I think as an author, in my case particularly, I think I have the responsibility to encourage, my readers through my writings to discover their purpose and to be able to be comfortable in their stories. We have a lot of stories that, that define us. And most of the time we have been told that we should hide those stories. We should be ashamed of those stories. My recently published book, I put a lot of my personal stories and stories of others that, that look like me. And a lot of people have read it and come to me and said, wow, the story that you have said, that you wrote in your book, it touches me. I was ashamed of, what I went through. I was ashamed of saying it, but having read it from you encourages me to come outside and share my own story. So I think that that's definitely an important part of being an author, and the fact that if we share a story, if we own who we are, then we are able to accept the others. We are able to extend that same love, that same kindness that we've shown to our own selves, to our neighbors, and as such build our communities. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Thank you. And Toussaint, could you share your view on being an author to advance the vision of Dr. King's legacy? You have to unmute.
There you go. So happy to be here with everyone. As we mentioned, it is good to meet everyone virtually. Happy 2021 to all of you. One thing that we know that we share in common is story, the power of storytelling. So from the very first day, if we can imagine, whether or not you believe in God or not, stories remain that one component that really bring all of us together, because we are in so many ways as powerful as the story we shared or as the story we told. And Dr. King understand how powerful this piece is for him to become who he is. And so this is why when he's talking about I have a dream, so he has to share that dream with us. He has to tell us what it exactly was that dream that I have that dream. So he's sharing the story, because you understand the power of the story. So as authors, we all know in all of us there's a sleeping author, because we all have story that we have to share. We all have a story, even though we paying attention to it or not, but that story is being shared, being told every day, the moment that you wake up. So whether or not what you do this morning, that's a story. And we know that we're also the architect of our story. We also know that we are the author, the poet of our story. So to keep that vision alive is to see how do we make the pieces, the story that Dr. King shared with us, and to continue all the stories and to pass them to the next generation. Because if we don't quote him, if we don't talk really about him, is he really alive? So if we continue to share his story, talking about him, is he really dead? So therefore, It's not a question that whether if he's really dead or alive. I think it's as we continue to share the stories, his life remain and it's in us and how we carry that forward. And I think one of your someone already mentioned that to see your face in the page of a book, to see your face in the cover of a page, it's really bring everyone up together. But at the end of the day, we're all human. So we know that as author, that's important for us. This is one way we can share that that story, his vision, is continue to let the community know who he was, what he's about, and his hope and passion and aspiration for our world.
Thank you. Benet, would you like to share your take on this question, how being an author can advance the vision of Dr. King's legacy? You're on mute too.
Right. I have to say that when I was in graduate school, when I read Rudine Sims Bishop, Shadow and Substance, that changed the trajectory of my life. I mean, that book was written for me. And I think and if you haven't read it, I suggest that you read that book. I write because I have questions and I have a lot of things floating around in my head. And the things that float around in my head become the themes and the issues that I write about. And many of the themes and issues that King talked about are the issues and themes that I write about. And as Shelley had shared, the book, My Elephant-Sized Dream, you know, I read a lot of children's books because I write children's books. And it's a story about a little girl who she interprets Martin Luther King's dream, you know, for young children. And so all the issues that I think about, that I question, then become things that I write about. And they're the things that Martin pushed for: unity, peace, love, and so forth. So, and it wasn't until, I think it was Walter Dean Myers who said, when I began to read, I began to exist. And I think that's so powerful because, you know, I wasn't interested in reading when I was younger because I wasn't reading stories about people who look like me. And it really wasn't until graduate school that opened my eyes to the world of children's literature. And I started finding myself in the books that I was reading, which I never had. And when I did my studies several years ago, I found that out of all the literature, only 2% of the literature was children with people of color. And I thought, this cannot be. And so I set out on a path, a journey to change things for for children who wanted to read about literature that mirrors their lives, but they just couldn't find it. There's more now, especially after in the 1990s, you know, we began writing more literature about people of color, but there still isn't compared to mainstream literature. It's a small percentage.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And one of the things that I really was getting from all of your answers, if we can keep it on that mirrors and windows thing, I guess if you only have one or the other, it makes your world very small. So being able to have the mirrors, windows, and those sliding doors is very important to make sure we keep that going. And also about telling the stories and talking about the people before us, the people with us, and the ideas. Seems like it's a very important topic. The next question I'd like to ask the group is, what is the power of words and how can we in the community use our words to help our neighbors? Julia, would you lead us off on that one? What is the power of our words? And how can we in the community use our words to help our neighbors?
I mean, I think ultimately words have the power to heal, to destroy, to build up. And I think that ultimately it comes down to how are we using our words in service to each other. Our words have the opportunity, as we're talking about storytelling, to either tell the stories that need to be told, to highlight the issues that are important. We talk about words, and I'm thinking about, Dr. King was a master orator, and just his ability to command the crowd and the hearts and minds of people by the words that he put out. And I think that ultimately our words are never divorced from our actions. And so, because words mean things, I think it's so important for us to just be mindful of the energy that we put out into the world by the things that we speak, by the things that we write. And so, yeah, I won't belabor the point, but words mean things.
Okay, thank you, Julia. Floyd, how would you give an answer to that question? What is the power of words, and how can we in our community use them to help our neighbors?
Yeah, that's a really important question. 30 million words is what the difference between low-income children, what they hear, versus middle and upper income. So by age 3, there's a 30 million word gap that low-income kids aren't hearing. Not to mention that the words that they are hearing are destructive words, negative words. And so we as a society, as parents, as community members, can change that by exposing our kids to rich texts, talking to them in regular conversation, exposing them to positive words that uplift them, give them a positive outlook on themselves. So words are really, really important. And we know that, vocabulary is an indicator of school success. And so when kids hear the words at a young age, they don't know how to spell it, they don't know how to use it, but as they continue to hear it in context, it becomes meaningful to them.
I hadn't heard that before. That's to me, it's a little disturbing, that gap. But let's see, Toussaint, how would you answer that question? What is the power of words, and how can we in the community use our words to help our neighbors?
I believe there are probably two ways that we can look at it. Is the first one would be, I will make the case that word doesn't have meaning until the receiver give meaning to it, give power to it. And as much as we know that has that implication, but it also means for that statement to be true, and the person that's really receiving that word got to know who they are, where they are standing, and what's around them. Because repetitions make the other case. Subconsciously, there are words that register into our brain that we're not aware that they have that much impact on us until when we present to certain situations and then we act certain way. So in so many ways, one can say that we have been programmed and not even aware that we've been programmed by the word that being used in our community. So we might not know exactly that's happening, but it's happening subconsciously. So that's why the concept, the discipline to create an environment where you are to speak word that has life, it's what's gonna make the difference, between life and death. By life and death, I mean the fact that I'm breathing, my organ working doesn't mean that basically I'm living. The fact that I'm no longer here, that, like I said earlier, doesn't mean that I'm not here. So we are in the world of author. We understand that word has so much really power in it. It's a weapon because we talk about, the power of the pen. We're also talking about the military power. It's because we know that with one strike that judge has really put that sentence on you, gonna dictate where you're gonna spend your life, if you're gonna live, if you're gonna die. So that's sort of the power that's the word that word has when you're looking at the life of Nelson Mandela. He was really inside those cells, but people talk about that, and for so many years that he was in there, but who he is as a person, mentally, he remained extremely sharp. But meanwhile, he was so powerful on the streets. So his physical body was not on the street, but his spirit, his presence was so powerful, people were not able really to stop him. So I think we in the generation, especially for the 2% only minority that's been represented in books, we have even a bigger battle that we have to do. And that battle is we need some ground to make up to really let them know who they are. Because I remember when I just moved here in Haiti. So when I moved, I was in 11th grade. But 12th grade in Haiti, which is the last grade, is where they basically break down for you what happened inside the revolution of Haiti. And here I am, left Haiti in February and of 11th grade. But the biggest battle that's going to take place to let me know who I am really as a Haitian, I missed that class. For good 4 or 5 years, I didn't know the implication of the Haitian Revolution until my brother-in-law said a word to me while I was at Messiah College, and I started doing some research. And then my lens opened. When my lens opened, I said, "Oh wow, this is who I am as a Haitian, as a Black person, particularly who come from Haiti. This is what my ancestors did." And the sense of really revolutions, what they did, that moment for me was that eureka moment for me. And at that moment, who I was when I look at myself in the mirror changed completely, because it gave me a different story when we're talking about tell me that my stories began way before my ancestors come to this island of Haiti. It was actually began in Africa. So that's the power for it. That's the power of leadership. That's the power fully of reading. So when we are in our community, it's become my responsibility, not yours, Shelly, not yours, Josh, not yours, Flo. It became my responsibility to basically let that community know what that community can produce, what are the words that's speaking on them. Because if each of us see it as my responsibility instead of we as our responsibility, then it becomes personal. So I know that every day, this is what I have to do. When you collect all the eyes together, it became we, it became our world, it became our universe. So we have to really have in the game. So basically take note, this is what I have to do. The power of the word to heal the community. Dr. King really speak on that really well, and he demonstrated that he was really that in the flesh. So today we know that. That's why we write, because it's gonna be so powerful in what we're gonna leave behind for the generations coming after.
Thank you. Thank you. Benet, did you have some insight onto this? What is the power of words, and how can we in the community use our words to help our neighbors?
Yeah, literature is a powerful medium. And we know that through it, children construct messages about their culture and their roles in society. And that's why it's so important for them to come from a print-rich environment. We know that children grow into the intellectual lives of those around them. And for children not to be around, to have, lots of books, they enter school at a disadvantage. And so, yes, they're learning how to read in school and so forth, but what's equally important is that they have this rich environment of books at home. And unfortunately, so many of our children don't have books at home for that recreational reading. Yes, you can learn how to read at school, but you need to practice that reading. You need those powerful words at home as well. So we're finding that although many children are learning how to read, they need to practice that and gain automaticity. And they're not doing that. They're not gaining that power because they don't have enough books at home to read. And that's been a struggle.
Christine, can you share your thoughts on the power of words and how we can, in the community, use our words to help our neighbors? Mhm.
Yeah, okay, I had to unmute first.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm originally from Cameroon, Central Africa, and growing up, words were used as a blessing, as a curse. Right from the minute you could talk, you knew how powerful the words that your parents, your grandparents, or anybody in the family could say. Someone could just use a word and curse you, literally. And we believed in those curses. So we grew up really being scared of what someone could say to us. And it was always a situation where, you're afraid, you're trying to not, piss someone off, or not, to get some of those curses. So definitely words are very powerful. Most of us grew up hearing words like, you're too lazy, you're not smart enough, you're not going to amount to anything, you're anything, you're not going to. And those words, when we listen to them being at a young age, we didn't know how to fight back. We didn't know how to reject those words. So we accepted those words as being our reality. Then growing up, that reality, those words we accepted started manifesting themselves, and the circle continues. So definitely words are very powerful. And just like everyone else has said, we definitely as a community have to, right from the get-go, it doesn't start when you're already an adult, but right from the get-go, the way we interact with our children, the way we interact with children in the community, to speak those words of faith, those words of love, those words of encouragement. I have a daughter here, when she tries to do something, or she's trying to learn a new skill with her ballet or whatever, when I say, go girl, you can do it, her countenance changes. She's encouraged to do it. But what if I said, you're not going to amount to nothing, don't even bother doing that, it's not going to lead anywhere? Then she'll be discouraged, and she'll not be able to pull out all the potential that is in her. So definitely as a community, we have to get to the point where we use our words to encourage our children, to build them up, to make them believe in something greater than them, make them believe that no matter where they've been in the past, they're still capable of becoming something better in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess there is a lot of power in the words that we use. Even though some of the words that were used today, to say life or to say death can be a very powerful thing. And we all can feel a sense of emotions and thoughts that run through our minds if you just hear those words. If you hear the word life and you hear the word death. And I think sometimes we can take that for granted. So yes, making sure that the words that we use in our community are speaking life into the community. I like how you said about using faith and love and encouragement. So if we all as an I, as Toussaint shared, if we all as an I are conscious of the words that we use in our community to make sure that they bring faith, love, and encouragement, then we can create a better community. Thank you very much. Before I get to our next question, if anyone in the room here would like to ask a question, you can put it in the chat, and then we'll bring those up if we have enough time here at the end. But I wanted to make sure that those of you here listening in have a chance to interject. So the next question is, how do books in your genre help to advance positive change? Floyd, could you start with that? How do books in your genre help to advance positive change?
I'll yield to someone else to answer first. Sorry. Thank you.
That's okay. Julia, our poet.
I think so. Children's books. I've always, even as an adult, I love children's literature, and I think that children's books are wonderful for a couple of reasons. One, I think they're great at crystallizing key things that have happened in the world, but in a few pages. So in that way, they're very accessible. So like even as a parent, like I think about the times when I read my kids' books and I also got a refresher, like, oh, wow, look at this thing that happened in history. So I think they are good for that, like also just helping. It's like the person reading the book and the person receiving the book are both getting an education, or both getting information, or both getting feel good things related to the possibilities of life. So I think books in our genre, they serve multiple purposes, from the imagery, right? Allowing people to see, like we've already talked about that, right? How people get to see themselves and see other people in the world, but also just the words and the way that they can be layered and offer encouragement, hope, inspiration. To this day, even I think about, I grew up watching Reading Rainbow, and I grew up watching Reading Rainbow. And so I just think about just how just seeing those books at such an early age and seeing those wonderful stories. Because part of I think also with Dr. King's dream, when we're talking about dreams, we're talking about our imagination. And I think the children's books absolutely help you tap into your imagination, because it's not just good enough for us to talk about the evils of the world, right? But we need our imagination to help us conceive the world that we want to exist in its place. And so I think children's books also help us to think of things that don't exist and how they could exist. They ask us to fine tune our imagining skills. And so I think like children's literature can just do so it could just do so much in such a short window of time, and also just within a limited amount of pages as well.
Thank you. Let's see, Toussaint, would you be able to share on what you think with the books in your genre can help to advance positive change?
We in the world of I don't want to say if I can call it the world of fiction really. First book is focused on children's 9, and the second one gonna be more for young adult book. That's probably gonna go up to 14 or 15. And I think when you speak to the lens of a child is, hey, you really have to be authentic and be they'll just tell it straight up. It's good, it's bad. They're not really, there's the concept of no filter is there. And I think that you as an author, that's also give you the freedom to be, because your audience gonna tell you, hey, it's good, hey, it's bad, this could be a little bit better. But we focus on superheroes of service is because coming from Messiah, coming from Haiti, watching my grandma really build an entire community really on her back. And we get to a point to understand that one of the greatest superpower that one can have is basically service. And so for me, this book that came out after Haiti, after the earthquake of Haiti, I saw so many superheroes that really came out through the crack of the earthquake, and the stories became very powerful that we can just really let them go by. So in the genre of the superhero service, talking to kids is, if ever I can have my ability when I was either 3 or 5 or 6 or 7, 8. So that's what I really long for. I want that audience to long for. I try to reconnect when you were a young girl or a young boy. The idea of being invincible, that you could do anything in that world. So that spirit is inside, all of us. But as we're trying to become grown up, bigger kid, and this strengths tend to diminish in our genre of superhero for, and kids, we're trying to remind everyone to say, no, you need to reconnect, you need to rekindle with that spirit that you have when you were young, a little baby, that you can do anything that you want to do. That sense. And I think that Dr. King, in so many ways, when we're looking at his life, there's a sense of him that feel like he was very invincible. Was the thing that he believed in that require he could go to jail for it, that required he can lose his income for it. But he was willing to give his life for it. And I think kids, when they are living their life, they don't really know what is death, if does death even really exist. They only know one thing, they only know how to live. and that, so in order to know how to live, one have to know how to be. And I think that is why we're trying to really focus a lot really when we're trying to use kids, our audience, because I believe they are one of the greatest teachers that we can have in this universe.
Thank you. Thank you. Benet, what is your take on that? How books in your genre can help advance positive change?
I have two things. One is for their bibliotherapeutic value, and the second is for companionship. I know for myself, when I read a book, when I put it down, I want it to make me feel like I'm a better person having read that text. And that's what I want for the people who read my stories, mainly children or adults, if they're reading them to them. And I want them to find companionship with the characters and to be able to relate to the experiences that the characters went through. And I think that's really important. That helps to draw us in, and that helps us to see the humanity and a universal humanity that's unique to all of us. So when I'm writing, actually, that's what I'm thinking about, is so-and-so, can so-and-so relate to this? So I'm thinking about companionship and for the bibliotherapeutic value that my books bring.
Thank you. Christine, would you like to share?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, okay. Yes, my book mainly focus on spirituality. I mean, I do touch a lot of stories. I mean, I've shared already, and like all the other speakers have shared about the power of stories. I like including stories in my books because I just feel that when we read those stories and we can identify with the people in those stories, that's sort of an encouragement, for anybody that's going through the same situations. And it's definitely a plus to advance change. Change comes definitely when you are aware of what others are doing and how others have succeeded on their journey. That encourages you too to be able to step out and do what is needed. And as each of us, we step out and do what is needed, then that's how the community moves in the right direction and changes positively. Spirituality, I don't want to sound like a cliche, but it's definitely, it's needed. It's necessary. There can be no change without our relationship with God, without us questioning that foundation. If we don't have, as individuals and as a community, a solid relationship with God, then it's difficult to love our neighbors. If just a single act of loving somebody that doesn't speak like you do, has an accent, comes from a different cultural background than you do, it doesn't come natural to us as humans. You need that special grace, you need that special mercy from God to be able to love your neighbor as yourself. So I look at my books as a way of really encouraging that that love, that growth, that community, living with each other by accepting the other person, who they are, accepting their stories, and it starts by accepting and loving us for who we are.
Thank you. Thank you. Before I let Floyd go next, I just see some connection with what Benet said about seeing the universal humanity when you're reading the books. And when we see each other in our humanity, I think that really helps us to be a better neighbor. Mr. Stokes, would you go next, please?
Yes, thank you. One of the reasons I yielded my time, I saw we were running out of time here for this forum, and I have an announcement that I'd like to make. You know, October 1st, we launched Reading 365, reading every single day at 11 o'clock. People from all over the world are a part of this. And as a part of that, we have February reading only books for people of color, the whole month of February. And so we're booked all the way up until the second week in April. People are already scheduled to read. So I had to add a date, February 6th, for just African American authors. So I wanted, that's filled from, I initially scheduled it from 10 to 1. Those slots are filled, so I've added another hour from 1 to 2 on February 6th. And I want to invite you all to it. Julia, her book, Black Mermaid, we've heard that one a few times on Reading 365. And also Shelley, someone has read your book too. I probably heard your book 3 times already, Julia. So that's awesome. Very, very, very popular.
That's
So,
awesome.
So I'm going to put my information in the chat box. So if you would copy and paste the information, and then be in touch with me if you can read between, I'll say 1 and 3, because we may have to end up adding 2 more hours to this day of reading, just featuring African American authors.
Thank you.
The whole purpose is for you all to get book sales, period. That's the whole purpose. It's awareness and for you all to get book sales.
Thank you. And Floyd's program, the Reading 365, if anyone here in the program wants to take the information and share that, that's one thing that we can do as a community, is to share that information so people can share the story time with the young folks in our community and keep
I want
encouraging.
to give a shout out to David Botero. He has read probably, I don't know, 10 times and a host as well. So thank you, David.
Thank you. Well, to end our program, I asked Julia if she would share one of her poems. So I'll let Julia go. And thanks again to all of our guests for being here today. It was a great discussion.
This was absolutely great, and it's great to see some familiar faces and also get to meet some new folks in the community. And I think also just a shout out to Floyd. I think what you're doing with 365 reading is amazing. And so keep up the good work there. It's very exciting. So Shelley just asked me kind of on the fly to read a poem. And so I try to find something really quickly to share. So this poem is called, it's from my book Survivor's Guilt, and it is called For Quiet Black Girls. And so Floyd mentioned my book, Karima and the Black Mermaids, and that book features a little Black girl who it's basically told in dream sequence, and she has this dream and she gets rescued by a group of mermaids. And so when she wakes up, she's trying to figure out like, oh, did this really happen? And so I think for me, I came up with that title because I knew that I wanted to put a little Black girl on the cover of a children's book, but I also wanted to pay homage to my son, whose name is Kareem. And so I think that we are definitely seeing more growth in terms of putting Black children on the cover of children's books, but there's still so much work that needs to be done to make sure that these books can reach the world over. And so I'm thinking about just the variety of Black stories, right? There's no single Black narrative. There's no single Black story. And so one of the ones that I wanted to honor was just this idea of, kind of what we were calling the awkward Black girl or quiet Black girls, or just introversion, and just showing different sides of us. So this particular story, I'm saying for quiet Black girls, but it's also kind of like for Black women too. So it's called For Quiet Black Girls. The world is afraid that your silence is summoning the riot within, preparing to overthrow the tyranny that refuses to see you, invisible until you won't see them. Won't bend and lift their comfort, carrying it all up on your back. Where do Black women go when they go quiet? A watercolor in her chest, a garden in her mouth, rest in her mind, building a fortress around her peace, in a world that won't show up in the same way, where reciprocity is privilege. Go ahead, Black girl, build a world in quiet and listen to the God within. Go ahead, Black girl, find your first voice before the world ran interference on your thoughts. Go ahead, Black girl, turn your cape into a pillow. Go ahead, Black girl, start a riot if you choose to. They know you could light a match with your tongue. Go ahead, Black girl, run and we'll follow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia. That was beautiful.
Thank you for the
Yeah.
opportunity to share.
And again, I'd like to thank our guests for participating today. This was an awesome discussion, and it is being recorded and it will be available on the website. I put that in the text, the centralpamlkday.org. And you can also check the website for the following of the other events that are happening today. If you'd like to listen in, join the discussions, and share the information. You can also follow on Facebook at Central PA MLK Day of Service. So thank you again, and keep reading. And anyone interested in joining the 365, you've got the information from Floyd. I'm sure we'll be able to share that information on our social media as well to help get the word out. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.